A pleasure to meet all at last, and welcome back once again to films I should have talked about years ago. So, for this instance, what we're going to do is we're going to take a bit of a detour from the 2010s and head on back to the late 90s, a time in which that there were a good amount of movies out there, a few of which were able to enter the billions in the box office, and they were among the first to earn such high amounts of money like that. Am I going to talk about any of them? Probably not. But I will talk about a few good picks that are more than worth watching. And one of them is simply known as Deep Impact. This came out in 1998. Yes, the same year as another film centering around asteroids, Armageddon. And while that film was probably more famous, mostly because of Bruce Willis, the likes of Morgan Freeman, Téa Leoni, Elijah Wood, and a few others here and there were more than enough to make Deep Impact a little more watchable. I will say, I did watch Armageddon a few times. I will admire that they even had Aerosmith playing in the soundtrack. But the likes of Deep Impact just resonate with me a little bit more. It perhaps is on account of the fact that I've been a big fan of Elijah Wood's work over the years in acting for the most part. Or because Morgan Freeman. What other high-valued acting name can you possibly come up with? And being that he's less than 90 years old, we might as well start paying respect to him right about now. So what does Deep Impact mostly focus on? Well, unlike with Armageddon, this one's a bit of a different take on the likes of asteroid-related extinction. As you probably would have guessed, it is about an asteroid. But not just any. This was actually something that was discovered by two different people, practically on a coincidental basis. One of them is known as Leo Biederman, played by Elijah Wood, who was then 12 years old at the time, which was pretty awesome. He and his girlfriend are basically looking up at the stars, and they notice some sort of comet from their telescope. And basically a little funny gags passed around every which way. Meanwhile, there is actually a telescope, which of course is operated by scientists known as Don Wolf. And while he of course is also fundamental in the discovery of an asteroid, this asteroid would actually be known as Wolf Biederman. Particularly because both Leo and Don were the people whom discovered it. And it's typical that if somebody discovers something, then they will in fact have their name etched in remembrance of these little scientific discoveries. The same is kind of true when you talk about certain fossils that are found underground, like brand new dinosaur species. It's kind of hard to truly establish the fact that you could have your name literally etched in history upon the discovery of a certain something that's brand new to science. In any other case though, while Don Wolf is actually able to get a message outward while eating some Supreme Pizza, he unfortunately does try to drive off with the information about the asteroid possibly colliding with Earth, and unfortunately gets in a wreck with a truck driver on the interstate. Yeah, so it's a fiery death that unfortunately spells the end for Don Wolf's career. But hey, at least the info's gotten out. And after some time has passed, there was even a reporter known as Jenny who was able to cover certain things that were going on at the time. And eventually, when word of the asteroid got around, not only did Jenny start talking a bit about it, but it also caught the attention of the President of the United States. Morgan Freeman himself plays that particular role. And it was nice that they were able to utilize an Oval Office sort of setting, so that way they could truly make it feel like the real thing. But then, of course, we get to the big point of all of this. There is the idea that the asteroid itself, because of it being 7 miles wide, and Jenny learning about the KT extinction on the internet, it all comes down to a unique adventure filled with a few astronauts on board. The team of which is, of course, associated with something known as the Messiah. This particular craft is a heavily modded rocket with a number of different capabilities, mainly the usage of nuclear warheads, in an effort to destroy the asteroid and blow it into tiny fragments, so that it does not cause another KT mass extinction in the modern world. But of course, with the many people that are there themselves, well, it's important to note that it's one heck of a mission. We not only get ourselves the likes of a pretty gnarly mission involving the astronauts going up into space, but also in the fact that Partenza and the company, as they're known as, led by James Cromwell's Alan Rittenhouse. Yeah, so you got James Cromwell leading the team there. And with many other members on board, it's safe to at least assume it's going to be just as gritty as what Armageddon had to offer, except for the fact that that movie had 2 spaceships in there, the Freedom and Independence, compared to the one, Messiah. So that's easily something you can differentiate between both films. But what it does is that it unfortunately exposes somebody to the massive rays of the sun. Because there's no Earth atmosphere to protect him, he ends up getting badly burned in the face. Yeah, didn't even get his visor down properly. But once they do manage to get out of there, unfortunately, the warheads blow up, only splitting the asteroid into 2 fragments, one of which is a mile wide, and is, unfortunately, able to collide with the Earth, causing a giant tsunami. And it does seem that even though the president tried a bunch of missiles firing at the Wolf portion of the asteroid, yeah, so while Dr. Wolf could possibly endanger everybody, the Biederman portion landed on Earth, causing a giant tsunami and basically wiping out a good majority of the East Coast. Yeah. It of course went as far as Ohio, according to the president himself, by the end of the film. But the Wolf portion is successfully destroyed as the Messiah's crew, at least whoever was left on board, were able to recover and utilize the rest of the nuclear warheads on board, but they thankfully get to say their goodbyes to their family, knowing their sacrifice has likely saved the entire world from annihilation from another 6-mile wide asteroid. So it obviously wasn't as horrible as it would have been if it were just a full 7-mile wide asteroid, but it still is in fact something that would have been life-threatening, possibly ending the human race. The 1-mile wide portion did cause a ton of damage, but with the Wolf portion destroyed, 6 miles wide of asteroid is all vaporized. Nothing but little chunks, floating down, sort of like small comets. Very similar, perhaps, to the ones that Leo saw along with his girlfriend. And it's important to note that the kind of journey takes place based on Leo going from trying to get into a shelter to heading on back to his neighborhood, finding his girlfriend, and finding the family of hers, and eventually taking care of the infant baby that they gave to them. So while the 3 were able to escape the massive tsunami via their small motorbike, many others unfortunately did not. Even Jenny, the reporter, reunited with her father after having some grudges with him, and thankfully reconciling, before they got wiped out by the waves. So with all of this in mind, and hopefully the brighter future that goes on ahead, it's important to note, we do have an upcoming real-life event happening. Apophis. Yeah, that's right, there is going to be a large asteroid coming to Earth in a few more years. This is something that's been talked about for years now. As early as 2029 is supposedly when they suspect that it'll be coming down to Earth. And while it's mostly presumed to have more of a close encounter with Earth rather than an actual striking distance, you never can tell. There can always be something that could possibly alter the asteroid's course so slightly to where it can collide with Earth. But I do remember as far back as 2010 when they were talking about this. Apophis seemingly is another potential real-life KT mass extinction level asteroid. And it is, believe it or not, slightly larger than the KT asteroid. That, of course, created the infamous Yucatan Peninsula crater, and the asteroid itself was measured at around 6 miles wide. But Apophis, 6.5 miles wide. And while not many of us can truly know what the kind of effects would be, assuming if they're anything like what happened in the KT mass extinction, they could truly blot out the sun for years to come, causing crops to die and a lot of food to go bad. So, that's the thing about it. With little to no sunlight, you can expect a lot of things to go wrong. Because we're not just talking about food, but we're talking about certain homes and shelters that typically use sunlight as a means to feed them, as well as other properties. Sunlight power is actually pretty eco-friendly when you think about it. But let's not get too off track here, because the idea is that Deep Impact is a unique film that watching today does resonate the idea of another possibility like this. Because knowing that extinction like this had happened many, many years ago, movies have been centered on the idea of an asteroid-related extinction, which is likely to happen. And given the fact that the asteroid belt, which resides between the likes of Mars and Jupiter, it is quite possible that you could expect something like an asteroid to show up. What do I give for Deep Impact, however? Well, it's got a good amount of acting in it, and it's got some unique action that is put onto this. A combination of some science and exploration, plus a bit of drama here and there, especially when you think about Jenny. Téa Leoni was able to play it up quite nicely. But from my final scoring of Deep Impact, it comes down to around 8.5 out of 10.1. Not exactly perfect in its own way because it was the 90s. It's probably not anything like we have today. But it still is most certainly worth watching to this very day. Nearly 30 years later, most of us can at least understand the idea that they were going for. Another possibility of extinction for humanity is upon us. And even though there was the idea of 2012 possibly being the end of the world, doomsday for all, it didn't exactly come to that. But I can probably look at 2012 like as more of a warning sign of things to come, rather than actual pure chaos. But that's kind of a coincidence. There's a lot of ways that people have actually gone mad and done a lot of things that nobody should dare think about. And while most of it's been happening since 2012, to this very day, 13 years later, again, not exactly something that's fully justifiable in that sense. Well, anyways, though, I've talked a lot about Deep Impact, and I'm sure that I'll have much more to talk about in other installments in the future. So I'll see you guys later in films I should have talked about years ago, and hopefully we'll get some pretty big picks here later on.